Welcome to the 2021 New Venture Championship semifinal round. This year, the New Venture Championship received entries from 75 teams representing 10 different countries. This reflects one of the advantages of having a virtual competition. It's open to all from around the world without the worry of traveling to Oregon for the event. The 16 teams you will see today were chosen by a panel of over 50 judges in our qualifying round that started back in February. Each track will have 4 teams, and during the event, those teams have 30 minutes to deliver their presentation and address questions from the panel of judges. This is a fully interactive event, meaning that the judges can interrupt and ask questions and at any time. The judges in the semifinals score the teams based on their submitted business plans, the presentation and question and answer, and their overall viability. One team from each track will advance to the finals. The semifinalists for this track are Eco-Daba Packaging, the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, India. Project Prana, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Transfoam, the University of Virginia. Leap Snacks, the University of California at Los Angeles.
Hello everyone, it is amazing to meet all of you. And today we present Eco-Dabba, which is our solution where we bring sustainability in this world one meal at a time. So you might be keen to know what exactly Eco-Dabba means, right? So Eco-Dabba actually stands for eco-friendly containers, as Dabba means containers in the Hindi language. So that is what Eco-Dabba stands for. I am Bindu, the CEO of Eco-Dabba, and I would like to take you through the problem first. If I talk about the problem, have you ever thought about what happens to the plastic container, which we throw so easily in the bin every day? So I guess not a lot of us do it every day, and we don't understand the repercussions, and that is why we want you to understand this journey of the plastic container. So I think this picture speaks 1,000 of words. As you can see, millions of animals die, die due to choking from the plastic containers every day across the world. And that particular container, which we throw guilt-free, well, 80% of such containers are made from plastics in the food packaging industry currently. And such 1.8 billion such containers are found and thrown into the ocean every year. And this particular data I would like to highlight here is only representative of India. So you can understand what the global problem is like if India has such a huge plastic dumping problem in the ocean. So now let's understand what are the negative impacts of the plastic across the value chain. What often happens is we believe that it's not impacting humans and it's mostly impacting the marine lives or animals specifically. But as you can see, it can impact human because there are harmful chemicals in the plastic. And we all have famously understood this report where they talk about how credit card worth of microplastics are ingested by human beings every week. So it has a huge impact on humans. Secondly, it also has a huge impact on the environmental aspect, given the greenhouse gases and the pollutants. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, it has great impact on the biodiversity as well. So how is our solution relevant? As you can see, there has been a global wave of plastic ban across the world, with India alone banning the use of single-use plastic by 2022, which is very relevant for us to launch our product, given that our product is riding on the wave of elimination of plastic. So what are we going to do once these bans are in place, right? Do we have any alternatives to plastic? And if we have any alternatives to plastic, are they really effective enough so that they can replace plastics for the long term? So I think these are the few questions which we want you to ponder as we go across this entire presentation today. And in that terms, let's talk about the existing solutions which we have. So, this particular picture is of the sugarcane farming. And as you can see, that post-production or post-sugarcane processing, we have this remnants of sugarcane, which is known as bagasse or sugarcane residue. And this is what is the elementary part of our solution, where we are, and this is what the existing solution also use. So what the existing solution are doing is that in India alone, we have 376 million tons of sugarcane which is produced annually. And as a result, what happens is 81.7 million tons of sugarcane residue, which is bagasse, is produced. What happens is currently this particular bagasse is being used to create these containers named as bagasse containers. However, they have a lot of problems. Let's talk about what the problems are. So the disadvantages of the bagasse container currently is that it's soggy and it can't be used in food delivery because it is a long-term haul. And moreover, it also leaks, and no one will ever like their food to be delivered in a leaked container where everything is mixed, right? And hence, these disadvantages propelled us to create an alternative to bagasse containers or plastic containers in general, which are very sustainable and can replace plastics in the long term. So now what will happen is that my colleague Nikita, who is the operational wizard of our team, will take you through the solution which we have in hand so that you have a better idea about what we are trying to solve.
Yeah. Thank you, Bindu. So now here we are presenting to you BioPBS, which is EcoDabba's unique coating solution. So let's try to understand what exactly BioPBS is. BioPBS is a 100% biodegradable polymer, and it is applied in a form of a coating. And this coating is applied to these bagasse container, which gets soggy and leak along with, and the sogginess is created into the containers because of the when these containers are brought into touch with liquid. So this specific coating BioPBS helps us to solve that particular problem. So our innovation lies in a proprietary coating process. So what we are doing here is we are adding a layer of bio-PBS using our customized coating technique. And this is making the resultant EcoDabbas waterproof and oil proof, as you can already see here. So we take normal bagasse container and we are adding these coatings to it with our customized technique, and then producing the containers which are completely waterproof and oil proof. This leads to high quality eco dabbas, which has the potential to replace plastic, because now we can store liquid food inside it. So of course we can store like we can replace plastic now, which was not possible as of now when we had normal bagasse containers with us. Now let's go ahead and try to understand what exactly are the value prop of these eco dabbas and why we are saying this can replace plastic. As you can see, this is Steven from Uber Eats, who is carrying your food in eco dabba rather than a basic plastic container. The difference being that eco dabbas are 100% biodegradable. These are water and oil proof, leak proof, microwavable, and for a container or everything that human being are going to consume or eat. If it is microwavable, it is going to be a huge need in the COVID times. So you can also microwave it, and it has a branding attached to it. That is why eco dabba can be tossed away guilt free. As earlier Bindu also explained to you what happens when we are throwing off the plastic containers. It hurts somewhere that you are causing so much pain to the environment, but our containers are 100% leak proof and biodegradable. So yeah, you can go ahead with that. Now, let's understand the circular economy perspective here. With circular economy at its core, we upcycle these bagasse from sugar processing industry to form eco-dappa. Post consumption, our products can be used for home composting or can simply be thrown away in landfills for degradation. Eventually these eco dabbas turn into nutrient rich soil, and this completes the circular cycle, or you can say we are bringing a circular nature to the world. And that is why we are saying you can toss it guilt free. And going ahead, let's try to understand when we said these containers are completely leak proof. To actually make you understand how this happened, we performed an experiment and poured some into this experiment. What we did is we poured some hot water into a normal bagasse container, and we what we found out, it started to disintegrate within next 15 minutes. Like the flakes were coming out, and if you are storing something hot curry into it, the flakes will be mixed with the curry. So would you even like to eat a curry having bagasse flakes in it? if you're concerned with replacing plastics, right? No, at least I would, and I don't think you would either. So that is why if you are having an eco dabba, and when we perform the same experiment and poured hot water into eco dabba, what you figured out, our customized technique let the bio PBS stay intact over the container, and the container as a whole can hold hot water for more than an hour, and you can simply store some curry into it, and that is why it becomes perfectly suitable for storing hot and liquid food, or perfectly suitable for delivery purposes. Now let's go ahead and understand, when we are ready with this container and we are actually taking into the market, what are the other competitors doing, and where we stand in terms of the other solutions and alternatives in the market, right? It's just a simple study that we did to understand our competitors better. Let's understand all the options available in Indian market so far. So as you can see, the generic containers, these are non-decomposable and seriously lack sturdiness. On the other hand, if we even go ahead with plastics, Tetra Packs, and bioplastics, these are sturdy, agreed, but they take hundreds of years to decompose. Conversely, that when you see this normal bagasse container that we also explained to you, this is solving for decomposition. It's biodegradable, but it loses on the sturdiness and gets soggy so soon. Hence, we bring Eco Dabba to you, and it is the best time to launch Eco Dabba given our first mover advantage. Now, as you can see, Eco Dabba's like really we are gonna scale, or our success lies in the hands of its customer. So it's really important for us to understand our customer segment, and what their needs are, and what can we actually solve for them. So let's understand the major customers that we plan to focus. Through our commercial B2B channels, we will capture the low hanging fruits here, and we'll be selling to the food delivery apps, restaurants, and catering services. And when we mention these food delivery apps, so these food delivery apps will be connecting us to multiple restaurants, to whom these food delivery apps sometimes provide some packaging solutions because lack of the packaging solution on their own, and we'll be reaching out to those restaurants through our food delivery apps, and we'll sell out to them. Next, we will also provide the online deliveries through e-commerce platform, and at a later stage we will partner with hospitals, railways, and finally our products will be sold through offline B2C channels at the later stage under mom and pop shops, for sure. Now, okay, then this is how the customer segmentation look like. These becomes a major customers and major places where EcoDabba will be used. Now let's try to understand it from the business perspective and the numbers, and understand the market share that we are planning to capture with these customers that we just understood. So the total serviceable market for us is 35 billion containers globally. We have the potential to replace, or let's say there's a need to replace 35 billion containers globally, with 1.8 billion containers only in India. Eventually, we are planning to sell more than 200 million containers annually by capturing 20% of this market by the end of 2024. And to achieve our targets, let's try to understand operations, how we are going to achieve this market share. So we are planning to scale into phases. Initially, we start small and follow an iterative approach. For this, we will collaborate with bagasse containers, container manufacturers, and research labs. So what will happen is we'll have these containers and we have the coating, but we'll be having research labs to coat this coating on the container, right, in our first phase. And in phase two, we will set up our own coating facilities where we'll have our containers with us, and we are coating by ourselves, and it will reduce our per unit cost. Eventually, in phase three, we will acquire the underutilized manufacturing facilities to perform in house end to end production on us, where we'll coat, where we'll make containers, and where we have our own, where we are coating as well and delivering the end product. Now it's time to address the elephant in the room, the profits. In the first phase, we have a gross profit of zero point 0.9 cents per container. This profit further increases to 2.8 cents per container in the second phase, as the manufacturing cost decreases because we are integrating the own coating facility. In the third phase, our margin increases further with a profit of 4.9 cents, as you can see here. And moreover, our in-house production facility decreases the manufacturing cost to 4.1 cents. Hence, we sell at a discounted price of 9 cents, which makes Eco economically competitive to plastic containers as well.
So
Hence,
can I ask a question
yeah,
right now? So right
yeah.
now, how much is a plastic container going for? Like, what is the
So,
selling?
yeah.
I can take the
So,
Currently,
question.
it is currently it is 7 cents per container in India.
How much was that? 7 cents?
Seven
Yeah.
cents. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
yeah. So yeah, so this is how we are planning to go, as the plastic container is being 7 cents, and we'll be able to be competing with the plastic soon. And here, as we can see from the cumulative net profit graph, we will breaking even in 3 years and 8 months. Moreover, our net present value currently stands at $70,000, signifying the profitability of our business. Right. The financials have been revised from the business plan based on the ongoing inputs
Hello.
and yeah, and all we need right now is your support to scale Ekodabba. We have
Nikita,
already
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we lost you for like, at least I lost you for at least 1 minute. So if you can just repeat
uh,
the how we are revising the financials.
am I audible right now?
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're audible. Yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is our financial have been revised from the business plan based on the ongoing inputs we have been receiving from our experts. We are like always into aligning those inputs. So right now, all that we need is the support to scale Egodabba. We have already raised $30,000 in pre-seed round through winning competitions and equities, and need a further investment of $170,000 in 2021. And for establishing a coding facility in phase two, we'll be needing this investment soon. And I really hope you are ready to take a step towards sustainability with us. And now Rajat, our CMO, will take you through the marketing strategy.
Thank you, Nikita. So now, next, we want to highlight our marketing plan as it is crucial for our customer outreach. And so let's start with the phase one. So in the phase one, we will be using SEO techniques and hire the sales consultants. And these sales consultants will drop in the restaurants in the Delhi, since we are piloting in the Delhi first. Now, moving to phase two, we will provide incentives like eco credits to the customers, along with riding on the social media bandwagon to influence the masses. Since there has been an increase in the general eco consciousness among the millennials. And lastly, we will use the target and cost marketing by partnering with non-profit organizations in phase three. Now let's talk about our impact, which is at the heart of our business. So we expect to reduce around 8,500 tons of plastic, remove the 51,000 tons of CO2 from our atmosphere, equivalent from our atmosphere, uplift the farmer's income by providing value to their sugarcane residue, which was previously been thrown away or being incinerated, and save the marine lives from the suffocating sheets of plastic. Now, coming to the potential risk, and we understand that every business comes with some risks which are important to mitigate through strategic partnership. And Equitable understands it. Being a manufacturing company, we have already partnered, we have a safety net of key industry experts for the advice and mentorship. And for the mitigation, we have partnered with Mr. Gaddam, who is known as the Bezos of food logistics in India, to help us create effective distribution channels for our equity bars across the major metro cities, which we are planning to incorporate in the phases. Now, it's time for some self-bragging about our company. So our idea for sustainable packaging has been recognized in various global competition. And the major learning from these competitions were to understand the extent of the problem and the market needs better at the global level, not just at the Indian level. We have done the extensive analysis for the global part as well. And now let's finally have a quick look at the amazing faces of the Ecotopa who have led us this far. So we have a mix of engineering and finance folks who bring the uniqueness and diversity to the table, helping us to tackle the toughest of the challenges being a manufacturing company in our day-to-day journey. And yeah, thank you. And do contact us in your any questions and query. We are happy to answer.
So yeah, I think we have tried to keep it short so that we have more time for the discussion and queries as well. We expected a lot of questions during the presentation actually. So yeah, we thought that we would
Yeah.
have the presentation part a bit short only. But yeah, we have uh, additional uh, slides if you want us to take you through that those are which are more detailed. So
I
yeah, we
have
can
a quick
also.
question on the patent. Is this do you own the patent for this technology?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I got your question, John. So the patent is on a coating technique, and we have already talked in touch with the patent lawyer right now, and we are working with him. So in India, due to the increasing cases of coronavirus, right now the process is taking a long time, but we are very optimistic, and definitely within coming months, maybe a couple of months, we will be able to complete this process.
What's the timeline, do you think?
So yeah, right now we have talked about the technology, and he said that it is totally patentable. So he has initiated from his part, and he has given us a tentative timeline of couple of months. So by to June end, definitely we will be patented our customized coating technique, and this is the time where we are piloting our product as well. So yeah.
Okay, but if you don't get the patent, then pretty much the solution's over, right? So everything's pending on the patent, correct?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we are trying hard to do the patenting. Yeah, this is our core solution.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think adding to Rajat's point, I think we understand that IP is very important for our product because moving forward, like after 5 years, we are also planning to license our product to the US and European markets. So establishing that unique IP solution is very important, and that's why we already initiated the patent process like in ahead of the pilot itself, so that people it's we are just trying to play safe, and we totally understand your concern. Yeah.
Certainly. And follow-up question. So you said by 2022, plastics are going to be outlawed in India?
Yeah,
Yes.
single-use plastic.
So
Yeah.
single-use plastic. But so is there a way, since they're going to be outlawed, your price is at a premium than current plastics, but there's not going to be other solutions out there. Can you take price because the margins are pretty lean in the beginning? Since you might be the only solution in town, could you take it to 15 cents? Could you take it higher?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
I
Bindu, will you show us the slide of our price analysis? This will give a better idea.
Yeah, sure. So by that, do you mean this one?
Yeah.
No, exactly. The price analysis of different alternatives. John is asking
Yeah.
about.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second.
Sure.
Uh,
Slide number
Because,
15.
I mean, 2022 is next year, and if there's no other solutions out there and single use are outlawed, you would think you would have a chance to take some additional price. You might be the only game in town, which is
So
exciting.
we can, but currently our target is not just the profitability. It would become very difficult for the restaurants having not a good profit on their own terms. So this would become very difficult for them to buy. And we firstly want to spread our product all over in India so easily so that everyone is buying us. And later on, when we get a chance, maybe we'll go towards profitability. But initially, our targets are definitely going to be help out folks in fighting this battle. And as you can see here, Rajat will take you through the alternative pricing that we have for
Yeah.
alternative solutions.
So John, you can see these are the alternatives available currently in the Indian market.
Right.
Also, these are providing the competitive pricing. But what we have found that after talking to 5 restaurants, specifically in New Delhi, so they are ready to take a higher price, buy the packaging containers at higher price, because right now, since they are providing the food in the glass containers, they are facing the major problem of sogginess. And the most of the Indian foods are usually the curry based. We have the liquid in it. And since the Indian routes are not compatible as much, and after transferring these food containers through the online deliveries, these usually leak through the containers, and the customers are not being satisfied at all. That's why our pricing in the initial phases are much higher, and later on we will be reducing our prices.
yeah, and I think I also understood one more aspect of your question, which was, can we charge a premium as well, given that with the ban in place, there are no competitors like the plastic competitors essentially. So yeah, we might be able to charge a premium, right? So what our plan was is to understand the Indian market as well. Like people in India are generally very price sensitive. So that is one concern which we had. And initially, in order to develop a brand value, because we have a very niche product in India, right? So in order to develop that particular brand value, what we thought is that we need to make our price competitive. And that's why we priced at 9 cents. But give it time, what we're trying to do is that once we have established our brand value and once we have a very loyal customer base, we'll definitely charge a premium. So it also depends on the market.
I would just say that once you come out with a low price, it's much more difficult to go high. Versus if you come out with a standard, you've got a unique product, it's easier to go low. So I would just be advised on that. The government's going to make it easy for you if you're going to be the only game in town. They're giving you the chance to charge a premium because there's not going to be any other solution out there. So I would monetize it as quick as I can. So that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
I think that is totally interesting. And I think that is something which we have not yet looked at very significantly. But our thought was that to tap the customers who are very price sensitive. But I think the premium idea is also very good. And we will look into that moving forward. So thank you for that suggestion, for sure.
Yeah, my question is similar. So right now, your whole model is based on the assumption that you can charge a premium. So say the regulations go in and people switch to aluminum or some sort of coated plastic. If you go to your business model slide, it looks like your margins are pretty thin. So if you were to replace the price that you have right now with the price of, say, aluminum, you'd be below margin, as in you'd grow this company, you'd lose money with every sale. So I guess that would be my biggest concern, is that the whole model is built on this assumption that you can charge more and that people will accept it in the market, which is well,
so
we'll see.
Sorry.
So if you were to look at this model and actually meet the price of the current solutions that could actually pass regulation, your whole business model and your whole financials go upside down. It becomes a money-losing operation. So have you run a scenario where you actually have to match price with aluminum?
Interesting. So what happened here is that what we did is in order to define why our pricing is the way it is, what we did is we did a quick customer survey as well. Like we talked to a lot of restaurant owners, we talked to a lot of people who generally buy from food delivery apps, like the employees and students. And what we understood from the survey is that a lot of people are planning to go to eco-friendly containers like ours. And let's say you were talking about aluminum, right? So the problem which we heard from them, like it was coherent across the people we were talking to, is that aluminum is not a viable solution, given that, as we had already shown in the competitors chart, that it gets soggy when you put food on it. It's not that sturdy. And what happens is generally it's also not biodegradable. So if I'm a person who is eco-conscious and I want to switch to any other alternative, aluminum might not be the right choice for me, given that it's not very impactful and effective. So that is one thing where we are placed differently. Secondly, also what happened is that we, as we told, right, we have our market target of around 200 million containers by 2024. So that entire analysis, if I do this back-end explanation of why we came with that particular number, it is based on our assumption that we are mostly selling to the restaurants which has an order size of more than 400 rupees. So when I say 400 rupees, in order to make it clear to you, it's a sort of high-end restaurants in India. So for those restaurants, what happens is that they already are charging, let's say, around $10 in let's say in US equivalent for a pasta. So for them, a packaging of 9 cents is not a big issue. What all they need is a good customer review and tap into the eco-conscious sentiments of the customer. So I think these were the two backings due to which we came up with a price of 9 cents. Though we are not priced lower with respect to aluminium, we have definite competitive advantage with respect to aluminium. So yeah, as you can see, it's not good in biodegradability. It is not good in carbon footprint. It's not good in renewability. So I think that 4 cents difference, 3 cents different actually, 3 cents, around 3 cents difference will not make much of an impact to the customer which we are targeting specifically.
I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree. I'm call me a skeptic. Here in Oregon, they outlawed straws. So we can't actually get plastic straws anymore. What everyone has switched to is these paper straws, which are, I can tell you right now, they're not nearly as good to drink out of as plastic straws.
Exactly. Yeah, I have been using that as well, so I know the pain.
Everyone here has been accepting, we all want to get rid of plastics, but what has replaced them is often substandard solutions to the things that they're replacing.
Right.
And everyone collectively has had to accept that. So this idea that people aren't willing to accept lower quality containers or lower quality performance from the products that they're getting, it hasn't played out that way here. As in, we haven't gotten a higher quality straw, we've got a lower quality straw, and everyone has sort of dealt with it and not demanded an increase back to the performance level. So I'm kind of skeptical that that everyone says they're willing to pay a premium. The reality of what I'm experiencing is that my experience as a consumer has decreased because they seem to have went with the lowest price solution to actually solve the problem for the straws and for some containers as well. So I'm struggling with the idea that people say they want this, but will they not go to the lowest price solution that they possibly can get away with?
I agree. So yeah, I agree on that point that customers might be willing to use lower quality solution given the lower price of that particular solution. But I think there are two types of market segments here, Joe. Like one is in the general world as well. If you see, there are two types of people, right? One who go for lower quality and lower price, and one who go for higher quality and a bit of higher price. Like every customer market which we have has a premium and has a normal customer base. And that is what we understand clearly as well. And that is why when we did our analysis, the entire market segmentation analysis and who will be our prospective customers, we majorly targeted the people who are willing to pay that premium price. As you can see, like when we say 200 million out of 1.8 billion, when we do this trickle down analysis, we are cognizant of the fact that only people who have the purchasing power parity of buying around food at around $10 per meal will be willing to buy our particular product. So that
this
is
was from the customer side, and even if you look from the restaurant side, any 3-star, 5-star restaurant would never want to deliver their food into an aluminum and paper mix container. So this is how we are balancing the difference. Yes.
We are a company based out of MIT and Harvard with the mission of developing and deploying a novel technology to expand ventilation capacity around the world. So ventilators serve a critical purpose in hospitals by providing respiratory or breathing support to sick patients in the intensive care unit. And the shortage of ventilators is a universal problem that directly results in higher mortality rates among patients with acute respiratory distress syndrome, amongst other pulmonary diseases. The COVID-19 pandemic has put a particular spotlight on this issue, with studies reporting between a shortage of 1.5 to 2.2 million additional ventilators just due to the pandemic alone. However, this was an issue before the pandemic and is in fact still anticipated to be an issue after the pandemic. As a 2019 analysis by Bloomberg and Valuates Reports projects a ventilator shortage, particularly in lower and middle income countries. And beyond shortages, the demand for ventilators is expected to continue rising due to the rapid growth of the global geriatric population, due to increased prevalence of respiratory diseases such as asthma and COPD, and as well as due to the cost-effective design of home care equipment and facilities that contribute directly to a growing demand for respiratory therapy equipment that includes ventilators. The global mechanical ventilator market size was valued at $2.06 billion in 2019, with projections that by 2026, the ventilator market size is expected to hit $5.20 billion. To put it simply, there has been, and there will continue to be a demand for expanded ventilator capacity. So there is a critical need for affordable and scalable solutions that would not require capital investment to acquire costly equipment that can be prone to breakdown in the long term. And ultimately, this will expand ventilation capacity of current healthcare facilities that otherwise might be limited by the number of ventilators. So what are our options here? Full functioning ventilators, although industry standard, are often too expensive for the market demanding ventilators, that is, these lower and middle income countries. And oftentimes in these countries, even low cost ventilators are out of budget, which brings us to the idea of multiplexing a ventilator. That is engineering a low cost solution to make a single ventilator provide respiratory support to more than one individual. And this idea has been previously proposed and developed. However, lack of the ability to control specific respiratory, patient individualized respiratory parameters, such as volume and pressure, has prevented their use in the clinic, as well as faced significant criticism from the medical community. And this is because non-personalized ventilation strategies in patients can induce further lung injury and can be incredibly dangerous to patients. So what do? Here we present the individualized system for augmenting ventilator efficacy, or the ISAVE as we call it. The ISAVE is a rapidly deployable, low-cost platform to safely multiplex ventilators to support multiple patients using a single ventilator. The ISAVE leverages off-the-shelf components readily available to intensive care unit caregivers. It enables patient-specific volume and pressure control, and it incorporates safety features to mitigate cross-contamination. In addition, we have also developed a mobile application to use in tandem with the ISAVE. And that's because although the kit is compatible with both open and closed circuit ventilators, low and middle income countries may not even have monitors available to monitor patients that are under ventilation. This mobile application is simple to use and contains highly important training information for practitioners who are transitioning rapidly into the pulmonology space as the patient volume increase. Also, as an application, it will have the ability to be downloaded onto a low-cost tablet and will further reduce the cost of safe ventilation. Developed by a team of engineers at MIT and backed by physicians at various hospitals of the Harvard healthcare system, as well as at Weill Cornell in New York, the ISAVE enables individual-specific volume and pressure control, as well as the rebalancing of ventilation in response to patient improvement or deterioration in an individual's respiratory status. The ISAVE is engineered as an add-on to be hooked onto an existing ventilator, whether it be an open or closed ventilator, and has been tested and validated on some of the most common models of ICU ventilators. And this includes Hamilton and Philips.
Can I ask a quick question here?
Of course, yeah.
So is there a regulatory agency or some sort of board that oversees the certification of this sort of technology? And is there a standard that you have to hit?
Yeah, so this is a great question and something that I'll touch on later towards the end as well. So the FDA is the primary regulator in this instance, in which case we've filed we're in the process of filing an IRB and an IDE in order to conduct clinical trials as under the control of the FDA in order to get certification for ventilator use. I'm not sure.
I'd like to ask, what's the status of your EUA application?
Yeah, so Shreya can provide more details on this, but we've submitted the EUA. Shreya, do you want to follow up more?
Yeah, so we submitted the EUA and we've received feedback from the FDA. So we're in the process of updating and addressing some of those comments and including our final manufacturing design in that before resubmitting.
If there are no other questions, I'll keep them closer. Yeah, so I was talking a little bit about sort of the details of the engineering behind the ISAVE. So essentially, it repurposes medical grade valves, sensors, and filters to circumvent any issues that may arise with the supply chain limitations. And even more specifically, it uses a series of valves and flow regulators in parallel limbs to control respiratory parameters such as tidal volume and positive end expiratory pressure, or PEEP, as it's more commonly addressed as. So the ISAVE has been tested using on a set of linear test lungs, as well as on pigs, as well as in artificial lungs. And the design, testing, and results are all summarized in a top research journal article in Science Translational Medicine. So given how the ISAVE has been engineered, the ISAVE can be used to expand ventilation capacity at any medical center. However, in our current efforts, we have seen that the profile of our primary end users tend to be those centers in low resource countries with critical care units, but severely limited in emergency care technologies. And this is reflected in our current partnerships between medical centers and ministries of health in countries such as Lebanon, Italy, Ecuador, amongst many others. Beyond the end users, we've sort of stratified paying customers into 4 large categories, and those are medical centers, government health agencies, NGOs, and then finally ventilator manufacturers. The specific customer we sell to in each geography we anticipate will vary. But in the beginning, our team is really focused on developing medical center customers because it will provide us with the most direct customer feedback loop to enhance our product before we embark on larger efforts. So Project Piranha's business model relies on selling iSafe kits to hospitals and health systems globally, both public and private. And we are partnering with medical device manufacturers in India named Inventor, who assemble the kit from parts that are already in the medical supply chain. Distributors then ship these kits worldwide as needed to our customers. And in some countries, we work with an agent to handle import and logistics and deliver the product to our final customer hospitals. So the cost of goods associated with the iSafe kit ranges from $250 to about $300 US, depending on component sourcing. Projecting the unit's gross margins range between 46 and 65%. And this has generated enough revenue to further fund R&D, sort of legal and regulatory consulting, labor expenses, personnel, etc.
The question, if the bulk of the product is available through current supply, what's to prevent hospitals or others from making a similar product at a lower cost? Do you have any intellectual property protection around it? Is there any piece of this that's protected in that way?
So I think Shreya can speak best on this, actually.
Yeah, so part of the secret sauce per se here is the proprietary software and integration of hardware software sensors that are going into this. Today on the market, a similar system that can sense pressure flow and respiratory waveforms is on the order of thousands of dollars. And so we've used some frugal engineering techniques as well as some sensor specialization to make that available at a much lower cost. The proprietary piece would be the software behind that.
If there are no other questions, I'll talk a little bit about our sales and marketing strategies.
So can I ask a quick question with you having disclosed your IP? How do the pressure sensors work? Can you just give me some idea of how the hardware actually works and converts the signal into software very quickly?
Yeah, sure. So we're using differential pressure sensing from both sides of the inspiratory and expiratory valves. And it basically integrates ventilator waveforms in a bit of a predictive cyclic way to enable, dual sensing and reporting of that, because it's, you're taking one ventilator and traditionally what's viewed as one waveform, and now splitting that into two somewhat unpredictable waveforms. And because these systems are interlaced, there's some errors that develop within the system, and the software goes to basically correct those errors and predict them as they happen, and make sure that reporting is accurate and precise.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you for the questions. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about our sales and marketing strategy. So we anticipate just following a traditional business-to-business model. In particular, the strategy will place a heavier emphasis on the sales side as opposed to the marketing side. And thus far, our team has developed pretty strong partnerships globally through our team, as well as through our associated academic institutions networks. The prospects will be prioritized by customer, and that will also inform revenue potential. And the sales process will be driven by each member of the team rather than through a dedicated or outsourced sales team. On the marketing side, we plan to collaborate with MIT and Harvard affiliates to sort of generate media buzz in order to drive the inbound demand. And this strategy has already led to some really great opportunities in Ecuador, in Lebanon, in Italy, amongst many other countries. Finally, one caveat that I will mention is that the healthcare sales cycle tends to be longer. So based on our team's past experience, we anticipate an average sales cycle of approximately 12 months.
Question, have you identified a point of entry? Who is your repeat buyer across all health systems? The procurement process is huge. You can have great success story with medical providers, nurses, and ICU staff. You could see the validation of your product, But as you move up on the chain of command for the procurement process, that gets more convoluted and there's a lot of red tape. So who is your repeat buyer or your repeat point of entry across all health systems that you can easily identify to shorten your sales cycle?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is definitely something that we're seeing come up. There's a lot of interest by ICU clinicians and people in the respiratory field. But as it gets passed up into their procurement departments, we are facing some of that red tape. Two things that we're doing to help with this is going after like private hospital systems. So there's a couple of these in the geographies that we're speaking to, which have a network of hospitals. And speaking to people that are on the business side of these hospitals, acquiring sort of emergency preparedness kits for COVID and beyond. And the second angle that we're taking is speaking to ministries of health who are actively kind of buckling down and getting ready to meet their surges. And so in some of these countries, they're actually having accelerated pathways, because traditionally going through a ministry of health would be an even longer process, right? But I think because of the alarms raised by COVID today, some of them are actually acting with expedited timelines and processes. And so we're trying to nestle in there for the short term. I think in the long term, those private hospital partnerships will kind of be the way to go.
This is sort of a follow-up question to that. So as you start talking to the hospital administrators, are there liability concerns about switching to this system? Have any of those been raised? Have you heard any about any of the liability concerns?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the standard liability kind of regulations and concerns do exist. And it basically falls back to the regulatory standards of that country and to the manufacturer's ability to create the product with statistical process control and quality management systems. And so we have those in place just like any other medical device.
Because how long do you think the whole process is going to take till you're fully approved and in market?
I think it's going to be dependent on each geography, but my best estimates would place it between 6 and 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah, including all kind of the best case scenario 3 to 4 months. But I'm just involving buffer times and lags for all this red tape and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you for the questions. If there are no more, I'll talk a little bit about our team. So our company has worked really hard to adapt this technology and make it as accessible to as many care centers internationally as possible. We've established partnerships with hospitals and government agencies in Ecuador, in Italy, and Lebanon, and have a number of others in the pipeline waiting for final confirmation. And in the meanwhile, physicians and medical students on our team have submitted an EUA, as I mentioned before, to the FDA, and we're in the process of submitting an IRB as well as an IDE to conduct trials here in the United States. Our management team includes physicians, engineers, medical students, undergraduates, business students, and an advisory board led by some of the most renowned biomedical engineers in the world. Our team was specifically composed to handle this very complex engineering of the device, as well as to handle the complexities of deploying this device internationally, both in the regulatory aspects and also in the logistical aspects of it. So to assist our team, I should mention we also work with contacts at the FDA as well as life science consultants to navigate sort of the regulatory steps we are currently taking. So thank you again for having us here. So since our inception in May 2020, the reason why we came to compete here is to sort of build up some funding to handle some of the regulatory processes that we are about to undergo in 2021. Our total operating costs before this year were about $75K and are projected to be about $110,000 this year, which is why today we're asking for these funds to sort of dedicate towards these regulatory approval processes.
What is your current, do you have any previous funding other than the 10,000 from MIT?
Yeah, if you want to mention, I think the 10,000 Sandbox MIT is our primary source of funding.
For the research itself and the development process, we were awarded $75K, which a lot of that has gone in prototyping, validation, the initial in vivo and in vitro testing.
So none of your friends or family have committed any finance during the friends and family stage?
We are currently raising that through a GoFundMe.
Okay. And your team seems very heavy on academics. I don't see any investors that I'm familiar with, nor do I see anyone that has any experience with startups, or at least it's not obvious on here.
So Srin Sridharan is the main person on the business side from our advisory board. He runs an impact investing firm, social impact investing firm called Thought, where he's managing partner. And then our other business folks are Brian and Paige, who are bringing kind of their MBA training into this.
I should also mention that Dr. Langer has experience with multiple startups, a lot of which have been spin-offs of his own research. So we do have contacts through him as well.
Okay. And he's been an operator. He's been the founder.
Yeah, I mean, he's like actively involved and able to help with advice and contacts and things like that.
He was involved in the initial engineering of the device as well. I should mention he's one of the authors on the paper that I mentioned previously.
Great, thank you.
A couple more questions on the IP. So the device itself is just two being hooked together in a certain way. So most of what could be protectable is the software. And presently, you are going for patents or protection on the software?
No, I think that piece right now will just be a proprietary piece. We're not going to be seeking patents around it just because of the lengthiness of that process.
Okay. Could the techniques and processes that you're using with the software be applied to anything else in the medical field? As in, where do you see this going?
Yeah. So actually, there is a digital monitoring piece to this. That front tablet, and Nikita, I don't know if you can play the video, the slides, a few slides earlier. It actually comes off, and in a lot of these global health scenarios, that these vitals are being monitored with analog devices to date. And so it's very challenging for ICU clinicians to basically keep track of everything. I can share if it's not actively playing.
Yeah, I don't think it's playing off this slide.
Yeah, not a problem. And so we're actually partnering with another pharmaceutical company in the US called West Pharma. And they are interested in testing their in vivo, like vitals remote monitoring IoT platform. And so I think they're interested in this because it's a good proof of concept to see whether this type of a digital remote monitoring strategy would apply to other scenarios. So kind of building this out beyond this first product, the vision actually is that we would take this and have that digital monitoring piece be applicable to a variety of other ICU based equipments and to really consolidate that because that will facilitate kind of like the workflow in those areas. Nikita, do you mind pausing your share? I'm not able to simultaneously share.
One question while you're doing that, you mentioned a bunch of different geographic markets. Is your intention to go to market in one and then expand into those others, or what's your kind of go to market?
Yeah, the main strategy was to go to market in one, and I think having that first domino fall will trigger the rest. We keep having these calls with different governments that are very interested and very much in need, but for one reason or another, they get caught up. And sometimes, they're struggling to keep up with just their COVID capacity at the moment and bringing this on. So we're right now attacking a couple of different geographies to see which one will fall. But once we kind of have the clinical trial started in one, we're going to put all our eggs in that basket and then wait for that to go through before we try to do too much at once. So here you can see on the digital monitoring piece, you can look at one patient or the other patient or both simultaneously. You can set alarms that can be auto set to default kind of parameters, or you can manually set them all together. But what you notice here is that all of these parameters are really centralized. And this is not the case usually for an ICU. So you have the pressure monitoring, you have the tidal volume monitoring, and we can wrap in capnography and all sorts of other sensorized details into this central platform in the future.
Have you got any feedback in the UI? I mean, I assume you have medical background, you have spent time in a hospital setting. You see those nurses those are the ones that are actually taking care of the patient. they are busy. And I'm looking at the UI right now. I'm worried a little bit about human error. Nurses, they come in, take a look at the screen, write their notes and Epic or whatever health medical record system, having to shuffle back and forth between two different views for different patients. Have you got any feedback on that?
Yeah, so I should clarify maybe both of the patients can be viewed on the same monitor at the same time. That's actually one of the big advantages of this. So the red is the patient on the right, the blue is the patient on the left. And this layout was developed with feedback from respiratory therapists, who are the ones that mainly manage these patients. And it really mirrors kind of a ventilator's format. So very similar types of numbers and layout, so that it's easy for them to work, and they won't have to learn a new system.
Have you have an actual ICU nurse play with this? Because
yeah, I mean, our clinical trial, our in vivo, was done by an anesthesiologist. So ICU nurses don't monitor this as much as anesthesiologists or respiratory therapists. The alarms would be fed into a nurse's, say, main panel, but the rest would be done really by a respiratory therapist or a pulmonologist. And so they actually performed our in vivo testing, and we did a piece on usability to see how long it would take for them to learn to use a new system and whether they made any mistakes. And this is actually rolled into our clinical trials as well going forward. So a usability piece.
If you can get the feedback from the nurses, that would be great. 99% of the time, the nurses are there conveying information and making critical decisions for the patients. Yeah. So respiratory therapists, anesthesiologists, surgeons, they're relying heavily on their feedback and input. So you can get this on hands of the actual people looking at them most of the time. That way to validate that the UI works from them and makes sense.
Okay.
When do you anticipate starting your clinical trial?
Sorry, I missed your full question. Do you mind repeating?
When do you anticipate beginning your clinical trial?
I think it's as soon as we get the IRB and IDE approval. We're really eager to do so. Yeah.
So you've submitted to the FDA, you have your approval for that, and then you're submitting to your IRB?
So we submitted the EUA, have gotten feedback on that, as Shreya mentioned. We are in the process of submitting the IRB and the IDE. And then we're working with some contacts at the FDA to help make that as smooth as possible.
When did you submit the EUA originally?
Sure, I think that you can speak best to that.
The EUA was submitted, I think, last November. So the main piece that we're waiting on to resubmit that is like our final manufacturer. And we're just making sure that, because once you submit the EUA, that's like the marketing approval. And so everything needs to be finalized at that stage. So we just have a couple more things that we're trying to figure out before we submit that final document.
Time's running short. Can we get to the financials before we lose too much time?
So I think I spoke on most of it. Are there specific questions that you had that maybe I can address?
Well, I just wanted to see what the earnout could be, what you're looking for a revenue stream in future years, because it was a little limiting in the business pitch plan. It was a pretty short window, so I just wanted to see if you had anything expanded out.
I think what we have in the business plan is what we have as of now. Don't have it expanded out from there. Yeah.
Okay, that's an opportunity.
Sure. Thank you for the feedback.
Along those lines, what other units similar to Isaf, what is the cost? How much they sell for?
Sure. So the cost of a full size ventilator, industry standard ventilators, ranges between $50,000 and $60,000. And then sort of the step down from that are looking at lower cost ventilators whose price oscillates between 10 and 15K. And here the iSave is about $250 to $300. So pretty affordable.
So if I can provide just like a quick anecdote to illustrate the context, we recently got off a phone with a partner in Lebanon. And so they were talking about, they have some 30,000 patients apparently that they're trying to get into hospitals. They have these ICUs that they're trying to open up. So she's talking about one hospital has 12 rooms. They have 3 ventilators and they're in like desperate need. So I talked to them and she was like, can you just mail us some units? Like we need this yesterday. And so they have this grant from the Red Cross and the ICCR. And she was like, we have $30,000 we're allowed to spend. And that means I can buy like, 60 of your units, right? With shipping and all of that, import taxes, customs, that would give her one ventilator or 60 of our units. And so spreading that across the hospitals that she has in the region to like address her immediate need. So really, like for us, once we get over this regulatory piece, I think there's a lot of demand right now in the world because of COVID. But a similar conversation I had with Kenya last June. When I spoke to the Ministry of Health there, they were like, forget COVID. Like we've had a ventilator shortage for as long as we can remember. So if you can sell us something that's like less than $1,000 a unit, like that's a huge plus for us. Even if it comes at lower functionality, we can double our ICU capacity. And so there are these like hospitals in this middle income range that have the like ICUs and have the people to actually support these functions, but they just cannot afford a $60,000 ventilator. So they just don't buy any of those units. And any of those patients that walk through their hospital, they're essentially just getting sent like out.
And I think something that's pretty exciting about this technology that was emphasized more in the paper, but I emphasized less today in efforts to focus it more on what we're currently working on, is that it can actually help up to 6 patients at once. We've primarily been talking about ventilating 2, 3, 4, but it can actually help up to 6 patients. So really a great tool for, as Shreya mentioned, our partners in Lebanon, as well as other countries around the world.
So as a unit item, right, it seems like the profit margin is rather small, but I think given these markets, it's like this, middle range type market where we actually could see a lot of sales because of their need and the price point at which we've placed this device.
Before time runs out, I just wanted to thank you all again for having us here and making this such a smooth process to present despite everything that's going on. It was really great to get your feedback, hear your questions. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really do appreciate the feedback and we'll work it into our future plans.
Absolutely.
Thank you for focusing on something that is definitely needed.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's a big idea.
My name is Alec Brewer. I'm a co-founder and the CEO of Transfoam. And at Transfoam, we're creating a synthetic biology solution to global plastic pollution. I'm joined here today by my co-founders, Simone and Kobe, who you'll hear a little bit more about later, but are our technical co-founders or technical members. So plastic pollution is one of the greatest threats to global health that we face today. Over 380 billion tons of single-use plastic are produced on an annual basis. Over 16 billion pounds end up in the ocean each year. Plastics are a particularly concerning material due to their composition, which is oil or petroleum based. These materials are particularly harmful to the environment and to the health of species around the world due to their persistent nature and their degradation into toxic microplastics or microparticles, which are the constituent chemicals that comprise the larger materials that we're used to. Such as this plastic bag here. So over time, as these materials break down, they cause endocrine disruption and cancers across various species. And recent studies are showing that these effects don't only take place in the ocean and aquatic species, but can bioaccumulate up the food chain and affect humans as well. So to combat this issue, the biodegradable plastics market, or otherwise known as bio-based alternatives market, is growing extremely rapidly. The market has really emerged in the last 2 years, but has been growing for the last 10 or so at a pretty quick rate and is projected to continue growing at this rate of 21% annually through 2026, and then is actually projected to pick up after that as the demand for these more sustainable alternatives is really mandated by both consumer and regulatory pressure. However, we're already seeing an issue within this industry or within this trend, and that is manufacturers actually can't scale fast enough to keep up with the growing demand. And this has really wreaked havoc on the growth of the industry and widespread use of these materials in single-use consumer items. So these issues are a result of a couple things. First and foremost, or ultimately it comes down to the manufacturing methods, which are expensive and, as I already mentioned, unscalable. There's a couple of reasons that this is the case, but the most prominent two are the use of unmodified processes, in particular unmodified microorganisms that synthesize these bio-based plastics, as well as virgin feedstocks. I'll dig into each a little bit more right now, but as always, feel free to chime in if you have questions. So on unmodified organisms, basically, these are organisms as they exist in nature, meaning they have capability to do a lot of the things that we want them to do, so just produce these bio-based plastics. But because they're unmodified, they've got a limited yield threshold, that which they're pretty much given evolutionarily or in nature. And it also limits the feedstocks that you can give to them to convert into these novel bio-based raw materials that we'd like to use more prominently. Similarly, on the note of feedstocks, many of the feedstocks that we are able to use are virgin. Basically what this means is they are a primary stream. Oftentimes this stream is agriculture, which requires a lot of time, space, and basically pollutive chemicals that cause a lot of runoff into the environment, which ultimately drive up the footprint of the process. Also, at the end of the day, and we'll get into this a little bit more later, some of these materials that they're producing and calling biodegradable aren't even really biodegradable. Again, we'll get into that a little more in a bit. So at Transfoam, we're overcoming these manufacturing limitations by using engineered microorganisms and a renewable waste plastic feedstock to produce a fully biodegradable polymer. The fully biodegradable polymer we're producing is called PHB, and that essentially will allow us to create a fully circular solution which eliminates waste plastic at both the beginning and end of the product life cycle. So a little bit more on PHB. PHB is what's known as a metabolic intermediate, meaning it's both produced and consumed by bacteria. And this is the fact that actually allows it to be 100% biodegradable in the environment. Now, the really nice part about this is not only is it a biodegradable material that falls apart at its end of use, but while it is in use, it's got the same durability and shelf life as, and I'll hold it up again just so everybody's got the idea, these single-use petroplastics that we're using, whether it be in the form of films, a harder molded casing like this plastic here, or really anything in between, because there are such a magnitude of applications of these materials. So PHB, again, is both 100% soil and marine biodegradable, and is one of the only truly marine biodegradable polymers. Again, going back to that ability to be degraded by microorganisms that produce it. So we are going to harness these microorganisms and then further engineer them to be able to consume waste plastic, again, as its feedstock. And what this will do for us is drive down the chemical and water footprint of the production process by over 50%. By engineering the organism will enable us to improve our yield threshold as well as the scalability of the overall process. And then our PHB, once it's extracted from the bacteria and purified out, is sold as a pure raw material at the in the accepted market price range of between $4,500 and $5,200 per ton at the moment. So this slide, how do we stack up against our competitors? The market is growing rapidly, as I mentioned, and as such, a lot of competitors are rapidly entering the market to fill the void. However, we've deemed our solution to be the most innovative, again, in terms of scalability and the renewability of our feedstock, and thus our ability to drive down our footprint. So first and foremost, we've got a higher recycled content in our items or in our finished product than our competitors do. And we say this because our competitors are reliant on either virgin feedstocks, as we mentioned, or renewed or no longer useful plant waste and feedstocks, which have a pretty low yield threshold themselves, which further contribute to a high footprint. Ultimately, because we're using a waste plastic rather than these feedstocks that I'm referring to, we have a fully circular product and life cycle marketing approach. Basically, we are turning plastic into plastic. So if you are actively, and there are many companies currently in this phase, you're actively in the transition of switching over from these petro-based materials to the more sustainable bio-based alternatives, you actually can label your products as such, that it quite literally seems that your products are going from these waste plastic materials to these novel sustainable alternatives. And further, because of the feedstock we're using, because it's waste-based, and because of our ability to fine-tune and improve the yield threshold, our product will be accessible at no extra cost to the consumer. Again, a reminder that that market price range is currently between $4,500 and $5,200 per ton. Oftentimes, these orders are done in a large order and sole provider nature. So we will implement our solution in the middle of what is a pretty complex value chain. But upstream, we will co-locate with a plastic recycling plant from whom we will source our plastic-based raw material. And we will provide them the value of having a high impact use of their raw materials, because at the end of the day, they are ultimately concerned about the sustainability of their outcome as well. They've got a very similar mission as we do. Downstream, we will sell our raw material for fabrication into finished single-use consumer products, which are then sold to individual consumers or organizations, and further downstream make their way ideally into the composting plant, but ultimately to a waste management plant or the environment, where their degradation will be lower footprint than any of the other current alternatives. I can explain that in more detail if anyone would like to know what I mean by lower footprint, because it is a pretty complicated point. Yeah, so we're going to sell our PHB for use in single-use consumer products. And initially, we are going to target single-use consumer packaging because packaging has such a massive footprint. In fact, it comprises about 40% of our total waste stream and a great majority of the litter that we were addressing earlier in this talk. So I would say Simone and Kobe, feel free to chime in if you guys would like, but our team is very well suited to tackle this problem and to do so with Transfoam as our solution. I'll start with Simone because Simone was the ideator of Transfoam. She came up with the idea about 2 years ago when we first started working on it for the 2019 iGEM project, and was joined by Kobe and I later that summer when we continued the first 6 months of experimentation, again, under that iGEM research timeline. So Simone was an experienced synthetic biologist before that. She had some lab leadership as early as high school. She's a published microbiologist as well, and was the lab lead for that project. And she continues that role now, leading our wet lab development efforts, and is our chief scientific officer today. I myself am the CEO, as I mentioned earlier. I've got experience in both the local and national entrepreneurial and biotech networks. That's really what I've spent the bulk of my college career doing and finding my passion around. I lead day-to-day business management and development, as well as long-term strategizing. And of course, there's a lot more built into this role, the legal, the financial, but I think that's just the nature of your early stage startup. And also in my experience, I've worked on several projects, in particular in the med tech space, under the BME's Minds program, as well as a couple others. And most recently, I'm also founding another nonprofit venture called Refurnish Seville, also sustainably focused. We are creating a fully circular solution to end furniture waste, as well as furniture poverty in the city of Charlottesville. Last but not least, Kobe, as I mentioned, joined on right around the same time, or at the same time Simone and I did, and really proved himself as our biochemistry expert and is now our Chief Technical Officer. So Kobe focuses on both up and downstream bioprocess design. So essentially the implementation of the device that Simone is designing, and has years of experience now in college in organic and biochemistry, and also interacts with a lot of external biochemistry organizations. Beyond just our core team members, our founders, we have an immense amount of support, as I mentioned, within the community nationally, as well as here at home at the University of Virginia. And so what really gave us some of the courage to go forward with this idea beyond just a research project when we first incorporated last year was the support of Dr. Kosminski and Dr. Kester. And so Dr. Kosminski was our PI initially for the iGEM project and is a well-established synthetic biologist. Dr. Kester, similarly, is a well-established nanobiologist, but has past experience founding several companies, as well as forming licensing agreements to use the technologies he's developed. So he's a bit more of a technical and commercial advisor, but he definitely has the technical knowledge and provides a lot of that insight as well. We've raised $140,000 to date from the organizations you see on the left-hand column there, as well as gained some additional support and services from them. And then on the right, you see the organizations or the people who have come out and given us support in terms of lab space, biodegradation testing facilities, and letters of intent to both purchase our material as well as perform research with it to develop more novel applications. And again, happy to talk about that one later as well. We've got a variety of expert networks that we're a part of here within the state of Virginia, and again, closer to home in Charlottesville. They're really doing an excellent job of building out both the biotech and entrepreneurial communities. And that's highlighted there by CIVO BioHub, who is part of the larger organization Virginia Bio, who's doing some really great things throughout the state and with BC as well. More recently, we've joined the VentureWell and Halcyon communities, as well as the CGIU initiative. We really got our roots back in iGEM. I think I mentioned that one earlier. And then most recently have joined up with the EPA and were awarded an SBIR grant to go forward with the development of our MVP and commercialization of it beyond that. So I've already touched upon a couple of these milestones, but we've participated in 4 incubator programs. That was at least the origin of a couple of the networks you saw on that last slide. And in August of last year, we filed our first provisional patent and are currently collecting the data needed to file the full patent in August of this year. Again, we were just awarded an EPA SBIR contract that we're going to use towards the development of that intellectual property. I already mentioned the 3 letters of intent, but one thing I'd like to highlight here is that they total over $4 million in desired sales of our PHB. And then most recently, in our approach to being able to fulfill those letters of intent, we have established a functional prototype. We are, for the first time, able to induce our process in a full waste plastic containing, or a waste plastic only containing culture. And we'll be performing tests to determine the yield, productivity, and other scale-up parameters in these next couple of weeks. So that's the timeline I just mentioned. We will assess these parameters and continue to improve them, really continuously for as long as we are continuing to grow. But as we're doing so, we will also be beginning the scale-up process. So later this spring, we expect to be scaling up into a larger culture size. Basically, this will allow us to see what the dynamics of the culture look like beyond the current small benchtop flask that we're working in terms of establishing what is known as a scale-up trail or train. And in doing so, we will also collect some additional or background data to go ahead and file that full patent So we're not only talking about the benchtop stuff that we've done, but a slightly larger scale, which might just create for a stronger piece of IP. Later in the year, we're going to engage with our first either private lab or CRO research engagement. And we're going to do so, or are hoping to do so, really for two reasons. We're actively exploring both right now, so we're not sure which one is going to end up panning out first. But the two that we are working towards by the end of this year or early next, are a blending partnership. So that is one such that I mentioned to create more novel blends and applications of our PHB because it is so widely applicable, as well as a scale-up engagement. So that would be somebody who would look at all the data we've collected thus far and basically put it together, put it into that next larger facility, that next larger bioreactor, and begin scaling it up actively with us. And as we're doing that, we will be producing PHB. And this PHB will be submitted to the ASTM and ISO material standard and certification tests so that we can pretty easily compare the performance of our material to that of those already existing on the market. Of course, we can do so chemically as well, but the
quick question.
Yes, Joe.
So in terms of the product itself, the performance of the product, so this is going to be limited to the use of, say, blister wrap packaging, and it won't be used in food and other, like, what are the applications where it can't be used? Like, what are the applicable uses of this?
Initially, we're looking for low barrier to entry applications. So yes, those that you first mentioned, but in the future, and there are other companies already exploring this, it absolutely can be used for primary or secondary food contact, textiles, or agriculture as well. So again, due to the low regulatory nature of your ag markets typically, as well as your niche non-food contact packaging markets, we see those as being the ones we would target first.
Follow-up question. If you're going to use this with food or liquids, how long does this stuff last on a shelf in contact with liquid before it just falls apart?
One of my favorite questions. So PHB has the same material properties or nearly the same material properties as the petroplastics we're used to. So in terms of shelf life, it'll have the same performance. Long-term, it's got the same barrier properties, so there won't be any water seepage, there won't be any air seepage. It'll maintain the contents as you need it to. In some instances, and this ultimately comes down to the composition of the blend, as I'm discussing in that fall 2021 box there, there might be certain storage conditions that need to be taken into account. For example, if you're chilling it, certain blending considerations. So if you plan on chilling your product, we would create a blend for you that is better suited for cold storage, as opposed to your typical ambient temperature blend that is produced pretty much across the board currently. So you can fine tune it, you can specialize it, but for the most part, there's no need to worry about those things, with the exception of when you're working in a high bacterially concentrated environment.
I was thinking like farm storage, like farms and barns and.
Yeah, so that's a very, very excellent question, and an interesting one. I would have to say that the industry is probably still figuring that one out. But the only one that I typically use as an example is yogurt. You probably wouldn't want to use it with yogurt unless you were certain of what's in your culture. But also that said, PHB consuming bacteria aren't necessarily everywhere. They're not blowing in the wind. But they are most prominent in the oceans, which is really advantageous for the nature of the degradation of the litter that often ends up in the oceans.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Could you repeat how much funding you receive? You mentioned VentureWell.
Yes.
I asked that through E-Teams. What stage are you with them?
Yeah, so first question, we've raised about $140,000 so far. The biggest sum of that was from the SBIR that I mentioned, and that's all been non-dilutive so far. With respect to VentureWell, we are in the phase 1 program right now. We excelled in that curriculum, and so we are applying for phase 2 in the next month or month and a half or so, and have been in touch with both Dave and Christina about that. So we're pretty confident in our chances in advancing to stage 2 and are really looking forward to that opportunity. We've heard some great things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, any other questions while we're paused here?
Will we get to the financials here by the end? I'm curious how you're going to monetize this solution.
Yes. So I'll touch upon this slide and I'll get to it. So really quickly, we're going to use the funds offered in this competition either towards the construction of our first lab space or to expansion of our team's capacity, either through student interns or a scale-up consultant, both of whom we are speaking with and looking to engage with by the end of the year. So as far as monetization goes, I'm going to be honest, I was going to put together a whole elaborate timeline for this, but I felt just using an example from industry was a bit better objective here, because it really is one-to-one with what our financials look like in terms of funding amounts goes and expenditures. So you see, I'll walk from the bottom up in terms of deal type. We are currently in that grant and non-dilutive phase, and there are millions and millions of dollars accessible to sustainable innovations like our own, especially given the nature of our team as collegiate students. And so we're really emphasizing those non-dilutive funds at first, as we are focusing on this MVP construction and early benchtop scale up. Beyond that, we would seek to raise somewhere in the realm of $10 to $14 million for the construction of our first pilot plant. And with this pilot plant, we will finally be producing at scale and making our first large-scale contracted sales before scaling up similarly to the next larger plant with a range. You see them using a $20 million raise. I think that's a little bit low, somewhere in the realm of $30 million for the construction of a semi-works plant is typically what you'll see. And then beyond that, to construct your next larger plant, your Series B is often in the $100 million range, after which you're seeing companies in this arena either being acquired or going public. So most recently, Danimer Scientific, if you've heard of it, went public via SPAC. They are the first and only name brand PHB manufacturer doing so at full scale, but have proven that it is feasible and it is absolutely, or it is profitable. John, is there something more you'd like to hear from that? I can go back up and talk about the actual order quantities and sizes if you'd like.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is about VC funding and grants and all that. I'm just curious on the revenue stream to keep the business moving forward.
Yeah.
What's your sales? What's your go-to-market strategy? Who are you going to sell it to? Who's going to be selling it? What's going to be your revenue for that? Cost of goods, all that type of stuff. So just some of the basics.
Yeah. So I have trouble putting this on a slide just because of how far out it projects. You really can't see the full picture. But I mentioned many of these orders or many of these engagements are sole providership and large order size. So our current order tonnage is somewhere in the realm of 40,000 pounds, so 20,000 tons, and that's order one. So going from there, the orders will only get larger as you ultimately fill more and more product lines and prove your capabilities after engaging with a customer over time. And so the PHB will be sold in that acceptable market price range. Our COGS, as you can see there, are in the realm of $2,800 out of that up to $5,200 price range on the sales. And we will benefit significantly from unit economics as we scale up. So in the early stages that you're really able to see in our detailed financials, you're seeing very high level costs and probably low production rates while we're working with these scale up contractors and manufacturers. And then by the time we've got that pilot plant in or around year 3, we will be producing somewhere in the realm of 500 to a couple thousand tons per year. And at that scale, we will be approaching our break-even price margin as well of the PHP. So again, benefiting pretty quickly and pretty significantly from unit economics.
Yeah, so this is, so it turns into pellets because you got pellets here for, that's the raw PHP. Do you have a visual of how the whole process kind of works from start to finish, or that's from a layman standpoint? I mean, I'm in the wine business. This is way above my pay grade, but I'm just trying to get understand from an investor standpoint.
Yeah, scientifically, this is the pathway, but going up to.
But they're pellets, right? So you add pellets to the raw plastic. Waste plastic.
Yes, you can do a couple things with it. So we are selling pellets, and I used to have them by my desk. I don't, unfortunately, anymore. We're selling pellets, and those pellets can be molded and turned into whatever form you want. They can be blended with other polymers if you'd like, and that's something we'd ultimately like to in-house, but for the time being, to maintain low costs of both infrastructure and expertise, because we'd likely need to onboard new team members for that. We are going to be selling those raw PHP pellets and allowing our fabricators downstream here to do what they want with them to make it into a finished product.
So to piggyback from your answers, so you take your PHP and you blend it with polymers. What is the footprint that's left, not from the PHP, but from those polymers? You still have some plastic remnants on the waste that needs to be cleaned up and extracted later? That's how I understand it.
That's an excellent question and an unfortunate approach that some manufacturers are taking. However, those are primarily petro-focused, or otherwise called entirely profit-focused plastic and packaging manufacturers. Our arena, or the arena we're focusing on, is exclusively bio-focused manufacturers. And so it's those who will only use truly safe, biodegradable materials. On that note, if you have a bit more technical knowledge of the space, PHP being the most biodegradable material can be added with a material like PLA, which isn't technically biodegradable, it's compostable, but can render it to be more compostable or enable it to break down even easier than it had previously.
Thank you so much for being here with us for the championship semifinal. We are Leap Snacks, and we're very excited to get feedback and recommendations from all of you to make our venture better. So let me start you off with the origin behind our company. I'm originally from Mexico City, and I grew up in a family that has been in the food business for more than 30 years. So I've always been very passionate about this space. And when I came to LA for my MBA, I went to grocery stores, and I did see a lot of products that resonate with my heritage in the categories of salsas and beverages. But when it came to healthy snacks, it was really hard for me to find anything that actually spoke to me. So I started to dig deeper into this, and this is where the problem and the opportunity came. So Hispanics are looking for healthy options, but they're looking for them at an affordable price. And right now, the majority of the healthy options out there in the snack space are on the expensive side of the spectrum. And also 75% of this segment is more likely to purchase a product if it connects to their culture. So there's a huge opportunity within this food category. And additionally, we're also very passionate about trying to diversify the way that people consume ingredients. In the US, there's an over-indexation of ingredients like corn and soy. So we also saw an opportunity to introduce Hispanic flavors and ingredients to diversify this ingredient intake. So what's the solution? Leap Snacks. We're trying to introduce healthy snacks for the Hispanic population. And even though we're going to talk about the features of our product, of our lunch product, which is a protein bar later on, I just wanted to highlight that we're trying to do a low sugar, plant-based protein bar with exciting flavors like guava and passion fruit that resonates with the Hispanic community at a value price. So this is our team. Today with me is Austin and Jordan, and they've been helping me in this venture for the last year. As you can see, we have a lot of different experiences from tech to consulting to CPG startups to finance. Now I'm gonna hand it off to Austin.
Right, thank you. So Alan, Jordan, and I took the idea through Leap Snacks through our business creation option capstone project here at UCLA Anderson, which involved a heavy focus on research. So we did over 120 hours of primary research overall, split across interviews with potential customers, as well as experts in the space with CPG founders, sales and marketing professionals, as well as food scientists. And we also did a 240-person survey with potential customers to cover things like willingness to pay, purchasing drivers, and consumer preferences. Then we rounded all that out with a bunch of secondary sources as well, like Mintel reports and academic journals. And our research findings will be sprinkled throughout this presentation. So first, let's get into the market opportunity. Like Alan said, the $80 billion snack food market is where we want to play. We're starting with a protein and nutrition bar, but plan on branching out into other snack subsegments as well. We chose the protein and nutrition bar segment first because it's still a huge $4 billion market, but is one of the fastest growing subsegments over the next 5 years with a 6% CAGR. In this area, though, we know we'll face a lot of competition, but at the same time, it's a fragmented space. So by focusing on the key trends and drivers, we feel like we can carve out a space for ourselves. And that's a focus on alternative proteins. So like Alan mentioned, plant-based protein. Then also e-commerce is huge. Protein and nutrition bars are the most purchased snack subsegment through e-commerce. And wrapping it all together, we want to be a healthy and affordable, better for you bar. But focusing on those key trends and drivers enough alone will not allow us to be successful. We have seen both through primary research and learning best practices from other players in the space that having a niche target population to focus on first allows for some success. So for us, we're going to focus on Hispanic, Millennial, and Gen Z consumers. Cliff and RX Bar were really the ones that popularized this the most. Cliff focused on the climbing and outdoor segment. RX focused on CrossFit. Once they found success in their target segments, they're able to get retail presence and scale nationally. Dang, we've included on here, although they're not as popular as Cliff and RX Bar, they're basically trying to do the same thing we're doing with the Asian community, and they've already gotten placement in over 10,000 stores. So there's a roadmap for this to work. You can go to the next slide. So some more details on why we think this is a good target segment. So 1/5 of the US population is Hispanic, and 53% of those are millennials and Gen Zs. And this segment is growing very fast. And so Hispanic population has accounted for 52% of all US population growth in the last 10 years. So not only is this segment growing, but also is their spending power. By 2023, they're projected to have the second largest aggregate spending power among ethnic groups in the US. And 57% are already protein or snack bar consumers, and their consumption grew by 28% in 2020, which was highest among all snack segments. And as Alan mentioned before, 75% of Hispanics are more likely to purchase a product if the brand makes effort to include elements of their culture. And this is really where we think we can be successful. We can create authentic messaging and branding that aligns with what our end customer wants. So moving on, we'll look a little more into competition. So Mezcla and Unite are really the only bars that we've found that feature Hispanic-inspired flavors. We included Go Macro and RX Bar on this matrix just for comparison, but I'm really going to narrow in on Mezcla and Unite. So first, when we're looking at the flavors, both of them feature Mexican chocolate flavor. Mezcla has Peruvian peanut butter, and Unite has churro. But then when you look at their other flavors, it doesn't really fit that trend. Mezcla has a Japanese matcha, and Unite has peanut butter and jelly. So while they do have Hispanic flavors, if you look into their websites and get into their branding more, you realize that they're focused on global flavors. We think we can be successful by focusing specifically on Hispanic flavors that are made in Mexico and tailored to a Hispanic audience. And the next thing I want to talk about is the combination of price and being a better for you plant-based protein bar. So while Unite is comparable to us on price. Sorry?
Question.
Yeah.
So how you differentiate? So you're focusing on the Hispanic market, but the Hispanic market in the US is heavily yes, is for Mexican origin, but you have Puerto Rican, you have Dominican Republic, you have from South America. How do you differentiate those flavors from people from South America that might not be familiar with horchata or guava flavors? Have you, or you planning to have you entry to market just to the people that relate to Mexican heritage, and then grow to other populations within the Latino market?
Yeah, so that's the idea. So for us, we're located in Los Angeles, which is a heavily Hispanic market. So we felt that it made sense to start with guava and passion fruit and kind of those kind of flavors first. But as we said, we want to scale this to other flavors that will capture kind of other regions. Alan, is there anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, what Juan said is true, right? I feel that in the US, they just categorize Hispanic population as one group of people, and there's different cultures and flavor profiles, as you mentioned. And as often said, California specifically is it has a huge Mexican heritage, people with Mexican heritage, and LA specifically is the second largest city with Mexican population, right? Like it's Mexico City and then LA. So initially we're focusing on Los Angeles, California, New Mexico, Texas, which are states that have more of a Mexican presence. And eventually we're trying to incorporate different flavors that can target the entire Hispanic segment. And we'll talk about this in our go-to-market strategy. But yeah, that's a great question. And we're very aware of the differences between heritage and where people come from.
All right, so actually that's a great segue into our go-to-market strategy. Everybody, I'm Jordan. It's a pleasure to meet you. So just as a primer here, and this goes into this exact question, is we understand that the large opportunity that exists here is to create a national brand that attracts not only to the Hispanic community and every subset of that, but also the average American consumer. And that is the end goal here, is for us to really introduce these ingredients nationwide across spectrums. But we have to select a place where we're going to get fast adoption first. Which is really key, we think, in the CPG category, is to get those sales coming through the pipeline so that you can scale nationally from a retail perspective and have the leverage in those negotiations. So we're starting with this targeted launch, which is a focus on the Hispanic customer segment, focusing on the Mexican culture. And that goal here is to drive fast, quick adoption, influence sales, and really get our brand out there as we move towards that national brand, which is where our Leap Snacks category will come to life, where not only will we introduce new SKUs and new flavor profiles with different cultural attributes within the protein bar category, but also across different snack categories as we grow as a business. So it won't just be protein bars. Before we had to sit down and start making a bar and formulating, we really had learned that you have to understand what features our target market and our customers care about. If we're going to really get this fast adoption that we're talking about, you can't just guess at what they care about and make a bar and hope it works. You have to really go down and do the research and see what they what they really want to see out of this protein bar category. And we found really 4 key pieces here. That's the culturally relevant ingredients, which we just talked about. It's also slightly different flavor profile. The traditional peanut butter, chocolate, heavy on the fruits in the United States type of segment, although taste great and people will buy them, they don't have that cultural attribute and attachment that we're really looking for. So flavors more on the sweet, sour, spicy side. Guava, passion fruit is really what we're going to go for in our initial SKUs. Simple ingredients is something that's broadly applicable here. We want to avoid processed and artificial materials, really keep that label simple so that people understand what they're consuming. And then obviously a big part of what we're trying to push here is inclusion of the Hispanic community in this better for you market and place. And we want to make sure these ingredients, although they're coming at a value price, are high quality and the bar itself is better for you and a healthy option. So let's talk a little bit about product development and where we are. We included some photos for you here and that kind of take you on our journey. On the left, you see here in fall 2022 is when we started formulation. This was done in our kitchens, just kind of bootstrapping it and us getting an idea of what we were looking for form factor and taste profile and just wrapping our heads around the problem. We then moved on to working with our culinary expert, which we'll talk about a little bit later in winter 2022, who really helped us confine those findings and talk about what flavors match, what doesn't, what it is about one ingredient that mixes well with another. And then now we're at a stage where we're working with our co-packer and our R&D experts to actually put together the formulation of the bar, and that's where we are now. We're in the second of 5 iteration runs to finalize that formulation. So you can see here we've gone through initial testing. We're in that formulation stage. Once we get that finalized formulation of the first product, we'll move to a product testing stage, which takes that formulation and says, hey, is this manufacturing compatible? Can it be made at scale? Is the shelf life where it needs to be? And all that product testing needs to occur to make sure that we can, put this bar on shelves and ship it around. And then obviously we'll go towards our first production run. After you have a bar, you really have to figure out how you're going to come to your community and speak with an authentic brand voice. We focused in on being authentically American and Hispanic. And why we say authentically American and Hispanic here is we understand that this isn't just a monolithic thing that you can attribute to everybody that's Latino or Hispanic within the United States. Every single consumer has separate attachments to how American they feel and attached to American culture versus maybe Mexican or whatever country they are from. So we want to make sure we're coming to our customers and our markets with an authentic voice and understanding that there are changes between customer segments. So we've defined some content strategy pillars here, focusing on the Hispanic culture with American ties, using those Latin American ingredients and including different ingredients from different regions as we grow our market segment. But then also on the sustainability side, making sure we're educating the market on how using these ingredients can affect the long-term sustainability of the agricultural industry and the food markets itself. Some examples here of how we represent that is on the right. This is actually our social media feed so far. We're avoiding doing the typical, hey, just photos of our bar and product and sales and promotions, and really trying to promote this brand as something that cares about this culture and is more than just a product that they're going out there and buy. We want them to attach to the brand along with the products that we create. And here's some examples of kind of what we've posted and how we do that. So reaching our audience is a big piece as well. We just talked about the social media piece and how we're going to build that platform. We're also creating a launch strategy around a Kickstarter, which is great because we make it some initial crowdsource funding, but it also is a mechanism for creating buzz and getting product demos and MVPs in front of people so that we create some noise around our product launch. Obviously, this goes into, as well as building out our website and our blog, which we've already begun to do, managing our SEO presence so that our DTC and e-commerce business is able to take off the way that we want. And we need to make sure that we create enough buzz and reach our audience around our product prior to doing that. And then obviously too, on the retail side, we want to go where our customers frequent, at least our initial ones. And so going and working with local Hispanic grocery stores and bodegas in the LA County area in Southern California will allow us to actually get that physical bar in front of our community and make sure that our brand voice is out there as we go through our launch process.
So quick question here. Quick question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Angel.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, do you have an existing database or lists, either from social media or otherwise, that you plan to initially utilize? And how long do you plan to run a list building campaign before you launch the Kickstarter campaign?
Yep. So we have our, we've already started to compile that, there's a version of the email list and just tracking who the potential customers could be both on social with followers and things like that. So as we went through our process over the last year with our surveys and customer outreach, we started building that list. Our plan prior to the Kickstarter campaign is obviously to increase that. So our initial marketing spend and dollars that we're dedicating to pre-launch marketing is all about building that community prior to launch. And we're not going to have a successful Kickstarter campaign or a successful launch unless we can ensure that list is ready to go. And so that's a big part of our initial launch strategy is that, I walked through our brand voice and how we're going to our customers. We can't start that after our Kickstarter campaign. That's already begun. We've already started compiling that list, and it's the key focus of our marketing campaigns leading up to the launch. Yeah.
And later in the presentation, do you get into how much you're budgeting for that campaign and for all the Kickstarter assets in the Kickstarter campaign?
We have all of that material, and we can go through that, Alan. Correct, it's in the appendix.
Yeah, we have all that in the appendix in case you want to dive deeper into that. But yeah, we're aware of all of that.
Cool.
Awesome.
Mine was a similar question. So it's channel identification. What channels are you thinking that this bar would do best in? Say Instagram versus Twitter.
Yeah. So we feel the visuals are a big piece of this. All of the channels are going to be pertinent, but our focus on Instagram, and then we have a secondary focus on video content as well. So not just like TikTok, but also YouTube. There's been examples in the past of companies that have taken unique approaches with video content. Impossible Foods is a great one. When you have taste tests out there, can you tell the difference between one thing and another? And those really create some virality around the product itself, but they also have a second attribute, which is education. So if any part of this is going to revolve around education on ingredients, the sustainability side of this, the digestible content that's visual video is a lot easier for the mass populace to consume versus, long form blogs and sort of quick Twitter ads. So we're really focusing on imagery on Instagram and then video content.
Thank you.
Awesome. You guys in the presentation plan to talk about distribution beyond the initial launch? How are you planning to go from independent distributors to scaling to larger markets?
Yes, sir. We will cover sort of our supply chain strategy and growth plan, and then we do have specifics on we want to get into it when we plan to go beyond California, when we plan to go to the southwestern United States nationally, and how that'll work. Okay, so on the sales strategy side, obviously we're going to be doing an omni-channel presence. That's both on the e-commerce and retail portions of this business. There will be the ability to purchase our bar directly through our website. We want people that have that brand attachment and are going and reading our blogs and consuming our content on the website to make those purchases. That will also allow us, as volumes increase, to get better margins down the line when purchase orders increase. We also will not be passing over the advantage of what Amazon does provide. The drive that they get from customers, the data that we have access to by being a partner with them and selling on the Amazon platform, is something that we will be taking advantage of. We also have a partnership with a company called LeadSphere that helps us manage our Amazon presence to help drive the initial traction of our e-commerce platform. That will be done in tandem with our retail launch, which, as I said, will start in Hispanic and independent grocers, move to those larger Hispanic grocery chains, and a regional standpoint going regional and then national, and then obviously the national broader retail chains as we create more products that we want and break into the larger US market.
Have you thought about like Gelson's down in Southern California? Because they're a smaller regional chain, but located mainly in Southern California. Have you guys thought about adding that into the mix?
Yeah, this is a little bit flexible. It's a great question. We wanted to put some definition around what the overall strategy was, but there are quite a few small retail chains that maybe aren't key, qualified as Hispanic grocers, but they're very much located regionally in Southern California.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good incubator. It's a small enough chain. I know they just purchased some additionals. I've worked a lot with them, so I used to live in Santa Barbara, just from a wine space, but I think that would be something that you'd want to target as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we won't be saying no to any sort of regional chain that wants to carry our bar for sure. And it works well.
It's a good validation because it's a higher end chain. So if you can get it with Gelson, I think you get a lot of approval from an outside chain as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that supply chain question. So one of our key competitive advantages that we are really driving through this process is the fact that Alan, through both his family business and working in Mexico, has an intimate knowledge of how this type of industry works. And because of that, we've been able to secure our supply chain early and really make sure that we have that established, because it's going to be a big part of us. If we're going to manufacture in Mexico and import to the United States, we have to make sure we're secure there. So if you look to the left, Baranolis is our confirmed co-packing partner. They're a producer in Mexico. They make about 3 million bars per year. They also have a focus on sustainability and inclusion, which is fantastic and matches with us. In fact, they only employ female employees, which is fantastic. And then they also have experience doing national distribution and working on white label products for companies like 7-Eleven and Walmart. On the import-export side, Land & Sea is actually a subsidiary of our founder's family business. And so we have been given access to that asset and have a partnership with them. They will handle all of our import and export needs. What they don't have is a fleet of trucks to do the actual shipping across the border. So we went out and we also sourced an additional partner there with Nuvo Cargo, who will be handling all of our trucking management across the border from the US to Mexico. So we also, we're not going to manufacture and do this process in Mexico unless there's an advantage to doing it. And we've established, outside of just the inclusion and the sustainability advantage that we want to drive, there's also a cost advantage here. So we didn't just go straight to Mexico and pick Baranolis. We did our due diligence and talked to different co-packers within the United States to see what the price difference was. We have a representative example here for you. In Mexico, you'll see here, going through the process of manufacturing this bar gets us to a total cost of 72 cents per bar. And U-Bar is a representative example here, which is a co-packer in Monterey, California. You see that cost is much higher, and at a minimum, we estimate it to be $1.27. One other thing that I want to add here is because we were able to establish this relationship in Mexico and the knowledge that we have, Baranolis is much more willing to work with us early on low volume orders, which is a very difficult sticking point for finding co-packing partners in the United States early. So being able to work with Baranolis and do 10,000 bar runs or less and make sure we can get that product right and manufacture at the volume that we need initially is a huge advantage here versus having to wait or pay more for that low volume order in the United States.
Awesome. So now I'm going to talk a bit about the numbers behind our venture. So these are the three revenue channels that Jordan just spoke about. And there's obviously different margins for each of these channels. On the right side, you can see for wholesale, we're projecting getting $45 per bar, and we're aware of the margins that retailers and distributors are taking in. This margin is from selling our bar to $1.17 to the distributor in order to have the ultimate price of $2.33 on the shelf. Amazon, we're actually taking the highest margin, 94 cents per bar. And direct to consumer initially, as we're assuming an average order size of 15 bars, is going to be the lowest margin of the three, but it's still important to have a presence throughout our website in case anybody wants to buy through that. But our efforts are going to be initially through Amazon.
Wait, can you hold on that? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me because typically direct to consumer, you're controlling everything, so your margins would be higher. Yeah. So if you're selling at the same price, but you're not having to pay additional fees on Amazon, why would your profitability be lower from direct to consumer?
Sure, that's a great question. That's something we assumed also initially. But the thing is, and let me go to this slide over here, is that it all comes down to the shipping costs. And because we're selling protein bars that are a lower price per, I guess, gram that we're selling, our shipping cost for DTC for an order size of 15 bars is too high for it to be profitable. As soon as we start hitting average order sizes of 25 to 30 bars, DTC is the most profitable one. But for this exercise, we're assuming that people are not going to buy 30 bars of a product they haven't tried, right? So initially, we're thinking that DTC is not going to be the most profitable, but eventually it'll grow.
Yeah, it's come down to shipping. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So before I dive into the actual financials, I just wanted to highlight that drivers behind e-commerce and retail. E-commerce is obviously order size, as we talked about recently, and we're assuming that the majority of the sales are going to come through Amazon. And on the retail side of it, throughout our research and talking with experts, we found out that at the end of the day, it's a volume play. On average, companies only sell around 3,000 bars per location, so we really have to have an important presence in California, and starting in 2024, expanding into states like Texas, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. So that leads us to our
when you say Amazon, sorry to interrupt. When you say Amazon, you're talking Amazon through Whole Foods or standalone Amazon?
Standalone Amazon.
Okay. What about the Whole Foods and getting authorization through Whole Foods? Because that's where I do my ordering, and this would also kind of fit through that because it validates it through grocery versus a standalone product.
For sure. The thing is that for the first part of our launch, getting into Amazon is going to be much harder than getting the approval of selling our product through Amazon for the get-go. Eventually, as Jordan said, we're looking forward to working with other third-party retailers.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that as well is this is also, it's a cost benefit of where do we perceive our customers are mostly going to be shopping and where they're not, and where we're going to be spending our money on promotion and shelving costs and things like that. So our assumption here is that we'll get more traction in other locations other than Whole Foods initially, and then as we produce those sales, drive a national brand where the typical U.S. consumer is aware of the brand and is purchasing. That's where it's great to go into Whole Foods and do that. We don't want to go into Whole Foods, not get the sales traction that we want early, and then kind of sour that relationship. We want to make sure we're going into that national chain when we have the volumes to support it.
Okay.
So on the revenues, we're projecting a 179% CAGR from 2021 to 2026 to sell above $19 million in 2026. And we just wanted to highlight how at first e-commerce is going to be the majority of our revenue, and in 2024 wholesale is going to take over and be the main driver behind our revenues. So we're also projecting that by 2024 we're going to turn profitable, and we're going to have an operating margin of 2.5%, and by 2026 achieve industry standard operating margins of 11.6%. So all this is great, but if we're not able to raise money and get some funding behind it, we're not going to be able to execute this. So our initial strategy is to have a 2-round raise. Our first round is going to be $200,000 in Q3 of 2021 from friends and family in order to achieve the milestone of 5,000 bars sold. The majority of the funds are going to be for marketing and sales, as well as inventory buildup. And in our second round, we're planning on raising double this, so $400,000 from angel and strategic investors in Q2 of 2022 to achieve 10,000 bars per quarter sold. And once again, the funds are going to be for marketing and sales, but primarily for inventory as we start to expand into the wholesale business. We really want to highlight some of the exit opportunities that investors could have with Leap. Obviously, there's a huge execution part of it that we have to achieve by 2026. But we just wanted to do this exercise using some industry averages on what could be the potential value of the company. And on the right, we also wanted to highlight some massive acquisitions in this space. We would love to be in this list in a couple of years, but we just wanted to highlight the opportunity that there is here. And specifically, I wanted to highlight Cholula, which was acquired by $800 million by McCormick, and they actually paid an 8x sales multiple, which is insane. And this just shows how, when it comes to acquisitions, they're paying higher multiples for ethnic CPG food products. So while there's some company risks on execution, from a branding perspective, we're not able to connect with our target customer, and also working in Mexico and producing in Mexico and importing into the United States obviously brings operational challenges to the company. Here we just all the potential advisors that we spoke to. They're not official yet, but we've had conversations with them throughout our entire process, and they've been really helpful in this entire process. And they have expertise in CPG, like Skin Tia and Alanita, and also Daily Harvest in the food e-commerce space, as well as Nuevo Cargo, which we're working with right now. Some of our partners are the executive chef from my family business who helped us develop the initial bars, Alfredo, who's in Land and Sea doing all the import-export, Diego, who's the founder of Barinolas, and Stefan, who's helping us through LeadSphere. So what's next for us? Over the next couple of months, we're going to finalize our product development and MVP with our co-packer. We're going to continue to reach out to our target Hispanic segment. We're going to work on our packaging to really stand out on the shelf, and this is key in this space. We're also going to launch our crowdfunding campaign to gain additional customer traction to ultimately be able to put our first order by the end of the summer for 10,000 bars. Thank you very much.
Can you share any concepts you have from a packaging standpoint? Is my first question. And the second part, and we can do this in the second round. But there's a lot of bars out there, as you said, a lot of competition, and I think taste becomes the biggest proponent because there's a lot of great healthy bars out there that taste like chalk because my kids go through them. So I think really driving that home and how you're going to differentiate from taste. I like your flavor profiles, but how do you communicate to the consumers that yours is better than the competitive set out there? So I think food for thought, no pun intended.
Yeah, I mean, flavor is key, right? As you mentioned, and I think that doing promotions and really putting the product out there for customers to try is going to be key in the adoption, as well as our communication throughout social media and the different platforms. When it comes to the actual packaging, we don't have any specific ideas right now. We're in talks with an expert in the CPG space to help us develop this package. We don't want to fall in the classic, packaging of all the other brands. So we're really thinking carefully on how to differentiate ourselves from a packaging perspective, because we know it's one of the most important things.
It's got to be unique packaging, so absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for the semifinals competition. And the winner of semifinal track number 2 is Leap Snacks from the University of California at Los Angeles Anderson School of Management.